The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
Welcome from the General Assembly and the City of Richmond. I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Comcast. The 2014 General Assembly convened last week, and we are very honored to have three special guests from the Richmond area. Delegate Jennifer McClellan, welcome.
Thank you.
Senator John Watkins, good to see you, sir.
Woody, thank you.
Senator Henry Marsh, good to have you here.
Good morning.
I'm going to start with you, Delegate McClellan. The Democrats swept the statewide offices. We have a new governor, we have a new lieutenant governor, and a new attorney general. How do you think that's going to impact this legislative session?
Well, it's obviously an exciting time anytime you have a new administration come in, and I think Governor McCullough set the right tone with both the selection of his cabinet and with the speech he gave the other day. He's really focused on building bipartisan consensus. He's been reaching across the aisle. He's focused more on getting things done, and I think we'll see, hopefully, that spirit of cooperation with the House, Senate, and the governor's office through the end of the session, at least.
Great. And Senator Watkins,
yes.
I noticed on the legislative website there are no committee assignments in the Senate yet because there are 2 seats yet to be filled.
That's correct. There was a special election that was held last week, and it was so very close that there will probably be a recount. The second special election in Loudoun County for Mark Herring's seat will be held on the 21st of January. And so there are committee assignments because the rules of the Senate express that the makeup of the committees remains the same unless it is changed by a future committee on committees. So we are still meeting. Committees are meeting, and we're handling legislation. It may or it may not change. Depends on what happens on the 21st and what happens on the recount.
Great. So how are things going in the Senate from your perspective, Senator Marsh?
Well, I think we've been working together pretty good in the Senate over the years. I don't see too much difference in that. We have issues on which we differ, but I think the collegiality in the Senate is in our favor, and I think we're going to continue that in this session.
Now, you mentioned the governor's inaugural address. I want to take a second to read a quote, and I want to have each one of you in turn react to it, starting with you, Delegate McClellan. Like the majority of other states, we need to act on the consensus of the business community and healthcare industry to accept funding that will expand healthcare coverage, save rural hospitals, and spur job creation.
Well, I think, whatever you call it, I think that providing health care coverage to the approximately 400,000 Virginians that don't have it is in our best interest, but also the fact that the funding to our hospitals and here in VCU, here in Richmond, the VCU health system, funding they get for providing indigent care is going to be dramatically cut with the assumption that we would have expanded Medicaid. And if we don't expand Medicaid or do some sort of option to provide health care to those uninsured, you're really going to see individuals hurting, but also the largest employer in the city of Richmond hurting. And I hope that we can find a way to solve that problem quickly.
Senator Watkins, I know there's a real concern about the financial impact of expanding Medicaid and the ability of the federal government to adhere to its promises in terms of what it will provide states like Virginia and others.
Well, Woody, there are 2 or 3 things that need to be kept in mind. Jennifer's exactly right. We've got 400,000 people that would then become eligible for Medicaid, but we also have another 600,000 people that are not insured at this time. And so that's where the exchange piece comes into play, and the Affordable Care Act sets up the exchanges. So we've got 1 million people that either don't have health insurance or aren't eligible for Medicaid. So they walk into the most expensive facility that we have, and that's an emergency room. And it doesn't matter whether it's in Richmond or Abington. It still is extraordinarily costly. The important piece that I think that often is forgotten is that there are specific taxes and premiums that will be paid to the federal government by all corporations, by all individuals who don't have insurance, and by high-income earners. Those dollars will start flowing to the federal government beginning this spring when estimated returns begin to be put together. We will be paying somewhere in the neighborhood, we Virginians will be paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.2 to $2.5 billion a year, annually. Billion with a B, annually. And in order to take advantage of that dedicated revenue, and that is dedicated to health care, you must be participating at some level, either with premium subsidies for insurance or with Medicaid expansion. I don't think a lot of Virginians are going to sit still very long to be sending money to Washington that they have no mechanism for recouping.
And Senator Marsh, I know this is one of your signature issues this session. Talk to us about your concerns.
Well, the first thing people need to understand is that the health care reform is the law. It's the law of the land, and it's going to be the law unless it's overturned. And with that in mind, those states that don't elect to participate, their citizens will be sending money to support and subsidize other states, and I don't think Virginia can afford to do that. We have health care. Virginia will be getting health care, but if you get it through the emergency rooms, that's the most expensive kind of health care you can get. So I'm hopeful that we can get a consensus in Virginia to support the health care law and to participate, because otherwise, for the first 3 years, we could get millions of dollars, billions of dollars coming into Virginia that we paid in and other states have paid in. And if we don't accept it and participate, we're subsidizing the health care of citizens in states that oppose the bill, but now supports it in the sense that they're not getting the money.
And Delegate McClellan, what about the potential for job creation? The governor's indicated, I believe, up to 30,000 jobs could be created.
That's right, and those are figures that actually came from the Senate Finance Committee, I believe, last year. And they're, in addition, those would be sort of direct healthcare industry-related jobs. But in addition to that, you'd have all of the sort of ancillary services and business that would come in. And so it economically makes sense, in addition to being the right thing to do, that rather than allowing our money to go to other states, that then we have to compete for to bring new jobs and new businesses here, they could go to a state where they have expanded Medicaid, where they have health care coverage for more people, and it just makes sense for us to do it.
And Senator Watkins, as I understand it, last year the legislature passed a law that created a Medicaid commission to look at the fiscal impact of accepting these funds. And they're looking for reforms from the federal government. What kinds of reforms do you understand they are looking for?
Well, there are several. Some of them that would probably be, would save us money, save Virginians money, would be to make eligible all foster care children would become immediately eligible for Medicaid. That would take the burden off of the general fund in Virginia and place it on a 90% or 90 to 100% federal dollars. All of the prison population could then be also moved to a Medicaid formula or a Medicaid system of payment that would remove it from the general fund and put it on the health care fund. Dual eligibles, individuals that are eligible for Medicare and are also eligible for Medicaid, we don't track them jointly now, and the objective is to make sure that we don't duplicate services, that we don't duplicate the administrative side of providing them with adequate health care and the billing mechanisms. So there are several things that can be done, but one of the things that I think would be most helpful would be to put a Virginia insurance exchange in, and in that way we would have a little bit better control on the insurance companies and the way the premium base gets established, and the Bureau of Insurance would oversee the entire mechanism. And then we could, take all of the individuals who aren't eligible for Medicaid but don't have health insurance, pool all of those risks, if you would, and use that pooling to lower that base for premiums, and then go for the federal subsidies to help there. So that would be another reform that could potentially save us money.
And Senator Marsh, the expansion of Medicaid would also now include childless adults, as I understand it as well. Do you think this issue, the Medicaid issue, will be the big issue besides the budget this session?
I do, and I think that supporting the expansion is almost a no-brainer. We have a situation in Virginia where we are worse than most states. We are more affected by sequestration than other states because of our proximity and relationship with the federal government as being a defense provider. We stand to lose a lot because the Congress is going to, we're not going to have sequestration. The other bills are going to hit us pretty hard. So we really need to do something to save our health care structure. It's not just hospitals, nursing homes, individual providers. They're not going to be able to survive unless we do something to take advantage of the savings that we get from medical reform. We've already, people haven't focused on this, but we've already reduced the cost of providing medical services quite a bit since the law has been passed. And once the structure is in place, we will save a lot of money. Before health care reform was passed, we were heading for a disaster in terms of the cost of providing medical services. And now we've already seen a reduction, even though the bill hasn't taken full effect yet. So I think it's almost a no-brainer. Once the public understands the impact, I think we'll get the support.
Delegate McClellan, if the state of Virginia does not decide this year to accept these funds, what are the consequences?
Well, we'll be losing a significant amount of money, number one, probably billions of dollars. And we've already, since January 1st, lost a significant amount of money for not doing it. Second, it would be difficult to keep a lot of our rural hospitals open, and those hospitals that are providing a large amount of indigent care will be squeezed by the cuts to their reimbursements for providing that indigent care. That will happen whether we expand Medicaid or not. And then finally, I'd say the other issue we really have is mental health reform. And what a lot of people don't realize, they are connected, because a lot of young people are diagnosed in their early to late 20s, just as they're coming off of their parents' insurance. And when they need insurance the most to receive treatment for their illnesses, many of them don't have the insurance to cover it. And so if we can expand Medicaid, it helps them as well.
And Senator Watkins, as you well know, the mental health issue has been highlighted once more, unfortunately, by a tragedy of one of your colleagues. What's likely to happen this session?
I think we will see reform. It's difficult at this stage of the game to see what the potential changes will be, because we're still having introduced legislation that's coming in. So we don't have all of the options or opportunities on the table yet. But I think that the funding, the bed space, the temporary detention orders, expanding the term of that, all of those things are in play right now and need to be looked at very seriously.
And Senator Marsh, I know that there are a number of bills you have in the hopper, one of which relates to public health and to public safety. An incident that occurred Independence Day last year, I think, brought that to your attention. Please talk to us about that.
Yes, in my district, as a matter of fact, in Chesterfield County, I think there was an incident where someone was celebrating the 4th of July. Father was taking his son to a parade, and a bullet came out of the sky. It hit him in the center of the head and killed him. And I attended the funeral because it's in my district, and I was amazed that the whole church was weeping. The little boy looks like a little angel and totally innocent, and he was killed because somebody was celebrating by shooting up in the air. I found out that this is a national problem, and the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta says a whole lot of states are beginning to address it. I have a bill that would increase the penalties for celebratory gunfire. And hopefully there's a way of reducing the amount of this that goes on. The Church Hill, where I live, on the 4th of July or New Year's Eve, it's like a firecracker going on. You think it's constant firecrackers. There's people shooting up in the air. And the key to this bill is pretty simple. What goes up must come down. There's a range of up to 2 miles from where the person shoots to where the bullet comes down. So this bill will simply increase the penalties as a way of educating the public. Don't celebrate any holiday by shooting up in the air. And hopefully that we'll get universal support for this. The pro-gun people should support it because it's going to make guns more acceptable when they aren't used to kill innocent people. So I'm looking for broad support for this bill.
Now, you also have a constitutional amendment.
Well, the constitutional amendment would endorse the Equal Rights Amendment. I think there's a possibility, a good chance that this year we can possibly get it ratified. And I'm putting a bill in that will start the process.
Great. Delegate McClellan, I know you've been working very hard on the ethics reform issue as a result of the problems the former governor had. Tell us a little bit about your bill. Compare and contrast, if you've had an opportunity to read the new governor's executive order.
Well, it's not my bill. I was part of a bipartisan committee in the House to come up with a package, and the bill is actually still being written. It would require a gift band of tangible items over $250. It would tighten up the reporting required for any gifts, travel, or food or entertainment. It would require gifts to family members to be reported. It would give some more guidance on who would be counted as a friend for purposes of any exemptions. It requires mandatory ethics training for all elected and appointed officials and for and periodic refreshers. It would create an ethics council similar to the FOIA council that would be advisory.
Freedom of Information Act.
That's right.
Yes.
That would be advisory, that would provide guidance, would study this issue further, be a central repository for all of the conflicts of interest forms. And that bill would apply to all branches of government and local governments, anyone currently covered by the Conflicts of Interest Act. The governor's executive order is stricter and applies only to the executive branch. They put in a cap of $100 per person and have a few more bans, but I think that's appropriate for the executive branch because they deal more directly with procurement issues, contract issues. They're full-time employees with a higher salary, and so it would make sense that you might have different rules to apply, but you also want to give each governor the flexibility to tailor their rules to their administration, so it is appropriate that happens in an executive order. This is a first step. I think there's no question that as times evolve, as new issues come up, we might need to make more tweaks. There's always the law of unintended consequences. We want to make sure we don't make being a public servant so complicated you need to hire a compliance lawyer and an ethics lawyer as soon as you put your name on the ballot. And so I think I'm hopeful we will find bipartisan, bicameral support to get, if not this, then some version of ethics reform passed, which I think we will. But I think this is an issue that we will continue to look at over the years.
And Senator Watkins, I know this is an issue that you are intimately involved in. There's always the danger when there's a lot of publicity around a particular incident or incidents to go overboard. And definitions are important, obviously.
Sure.
So talk to us about the legislation that you are patroning.
Well, I think that we need to be very careful, because I think Jennifer's comment is right. Pretty soon it will be almost impossible to be a part-time legislator here in Virginia. You know, I'm involved in about 3 different businesses beyond the legislature. And quite frankly, those businesses typically don't have anything to do with what I do as a legislator. Now, I've got to be able to draw the line with regard to what's reportable, what's not reportable, what's acceptable. Have I violated the law because I accepted a gift? You know, I'll be honest with you, I think that the press has taken this thing completely beyond where the problem was. And we are now responding to the Fourth Estate. Yeah, it never hurts to relook at ethics. I think all of us have that called in question. But we are part-time legislators. We're supposed to be citizen legislators. That means that we're supposed to go back home and live in our communities and do business as business people, so that we have a good understanding of what the cause and effects are of some of the legislation that we've passed. So what I did is I honed in on one specific area, and that's the area in which the problem arose, and that is that the legislation I proposed requires that anyone who is in a full-time elected position, governor and attorney general would be the two at the top, that their family, immediate family and spouses, will fall under the same reporting requirements that all the rest of us do. It's just that simple. And the other thing, you know, we're talking about changing timing for lobbyist reports and all that. The individual involved in this particular situation was not a registered lobbyist. Never has been. And he's created this problem. Mm-hmm. So let's address the problem and deal with the problem. Take a look at ethics, sure. It never hurts. But we're on the verge of making it impossible for business people to be elected officials.
Senator Marsh, more transparency is needed so the public can at least judge, pursuant to whatever disclosures are made by you and your colleagues, about whether you're ethical.
Well, Virginia is different from most states. We don't have limits per se, right, but we have disclosure, which is supposed to be a deterrent to any misuse. I like the Virginia system, but I do think there are areas in it where it can be exploited. As a matter of fact, if we follow strictly our current laws, we wouldn't have the problems that we have going through now. But I'm going to look at all the legislation carefully and make a decision the way I always make them, do the right thing. And I think the public is concerned because of all the adverse publicity involved in the situation. But as legislators, we have to look at the situation close and make sure that we protect the public interest.
We had a banner year last year in terms of transportation. Finally got a transportation bill passed. There's still a lot of issues in regards to that transportation bill. There's going to have to be a set of priorities that the legislature determines in terms of where the money is going to go. How do you think that's going to play out, Delegate McClellan?
Well, John, I think, is probably more of an expert on that than I am, but that is something that we're going to take a close look at. We do have bills in to undo that whole deal, and don't think that's going to happen, but there are also bills that would tighten up the process of deciding what projects get worked on. But I think what we did last year was significant in a number of ways. Not only just the first time that we invested in our transportation system in over 30 years, but the fact that we were able to put partisan differences aside and address the #1 issue that Virginians said they wanted addressed. I'm hoping we do the same thing this year with Medicaid expansion.
Senator Watkins, talk to us a little bit about transportation.
We have a system, utilizing the Transportation Board that sets the priorities with regard to construction. There are some specific projects that probably warrant a second look because of their size, the amount of indebtedness, and the involvement or lack thereof, if you would, of the public. So we've got to get through the rough spots. I hope we don't do too much too quickly. We need to find out what that revenue picture is actually going to look like. We passed it, and when we feel good about it, I feel great about it because, and it wasn't a perfect bill. I don't know that there is a perfect bill, but for the first time in 27 years, we've got a revenue stream that can be built on, and that we can build what we need. The unique piece for me was, for the first time in history, we've actually set up a dedicated fund for rail and mass transit, and we needed that desperately.
Great. Senator Marsh, we've got about a minute and a half left. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that.
I think that there are different priorities in different parts of the state. Basically, there are 3 areas, Northern Virginia, which has an acute problem because of the density. Tidewater, because of the rivers and streams, they have a problem. If something happened, how can they get from A to B in the event of an emergency? And in Richmond, in the Central Virginia area, our problem is not as severe, but we have problems with urban transportation of buses and ways of moving people to hospitals and jobs. But I think if we look at it in the way of where we are in the state, we can find a solution that will satisfy all areas.
Great. And Delegate McClellan, what's needed to ensure a diversity in our economy as the governor has proposed?
Well, I think the key is going to be finding and bringing new businesses into Virginia. Senator Marsh alluded to, we are the most vulnerable to sequestration, and we're going to need to find new industries and new businesses to make up the difference from those. I will highlight what is already our #1 export industry, and that is agribusiness. And I think we're finding new ways to grow and expand that business, and particularly in areas that have lost manufacturing jobs that are never coming back.
Great. Don't have enough time. We'll have you back.
It's not just new businesses. I think we have to do something to retain the existing businesses because there's competition between states, etc.
Good point. Thank you all for being here. State Senator Henry Marsh, Frank Watkins, and Delegate Jennifer McClellan.
Thank
you. John. I'm sorry, John. That's all right. Thank you for watching Cable Reports. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.